Welcome in, everybody, to the next edition of SEC Mafia. We want to thank you to all of our followers and subscribers and listeners and commenters for being along with us on this ride, guys. We've enjoyed doing this and we want to keep doing it. So please like and subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter, Facebook, and make sure you hit the little bell on YouTube to make sure you're subscribed to us. And as always, we always love interacting with our fans. Love hanging out with you guys each week.
Yeah, again, thanks for being here, guys. If you go that next slide, there is our social media handles on X at SEC Godfather, email secgodfather@mail.com, and then the Facebook handle is Randy Thomas. Another exciting weekend. Of course, we've wrapped up regular season and championship weekend, and all eyes are on the playoff push at this point in time. So,
Absolutely, and with that, we know we're going to be recapping the SEC championship game as well as kind of looking what the final outlook is for the college football playoff. A few talking points there, as many of us already know, with all the media that is going on with that. We'll cover most of the things with that. So as we look into this SEC championship game, you kind of have to look back to the first game between these two teams as well. The first meeting was a gritty defensive meeting, gritty defensive slugfest. Both teams in the first round combined for 7 turnovers, and neither surpassed 300 yards of offense. And I feel like this game was very similar. I know Texas had like 380 something yards of offense this game, but the first half felt pretty much the same as the first meeting between these two.
yeah, I thought the big difference in the game, the first go around, Texas turned the ball over 4 times. This time they were much better. They only turned it over twice. But the big difference in this game is Texas didn't turn the ball over and set Georgia up with short fields often in the first half to allow Georgia to build that big lead and cause Texas to feel like they were in desperation mode and playing from behind. I really think that these two teams are pretty evenly matched. But after watching Texas last year in a close game against Oklahoma in the regular season, after watching Texas in a close game against Washington in the playoffs, and twice against Georgia, I kind of start to have the question pop up. Can Quinn Ewers and Sarkisian together, can they win that close championship type game together? Because this just felt like, even when it went to overtime, and maybe some people had a different view of it as they were watching it, but I really never thought Texas was going to win the game. I just never did. So many times in the first half, they had to settle for field goals and field goal misses, and you just don't win those championship type games, especially against a team like Georgia having to kick field goals. You got to bite the head off the snake or cut the head off the snake and put them away. Texas had a chance to be up 14-21 to nothing in this game, and
Absolutely.
they weren't.
So 6-3 at the end of the first half. This marked the first time in SEC history that a team didn't score in the first half of the SEC championship game. As we all know, it did go to overtime, and this is the very first time in the 33 years of the SEC championship game that it went to overtime. To kind of reiterate on Texas not being able to finish these big games, Texas not being able to cut the head off the snake, like you said, Texas just continually stalled out on drives all night long. I want to say they were 1 for 2 in the red zone, whereas Georgia was 3 for 3 in the red zone. And a couple of the times they didn't even make it to the red zone that they had to settle for field goals. And they were moving the ball. I mean, they were moving the ball to start those drives out. And then credit to Texas's defense. I mean, they were bending and not breaking and forcing them to kick field goals. And a field goal in this day and age is a victory for a defense. I mean, because like you said, Texas just couldn't finish drives. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that Georgia really seemed to have the mindset that they were not going to get beat deep. If they allowed Texas to get a few yards, that was fine. And then once they got, inside the 30-yard line, then they would put the clamps on the defense. And so I think you've seen, Texas move the ball in between the 20s a lot better than they did the first matchup. Uh, the key stat for me is 1.1.
One. Yep.
Texas averaged
1.1.
1.1 yard per carry, and they carried the ball 28 times.
So
They had 28 rushing attempts and only managed 1.1 yard per carry. And get this, their longest was 15. So on 27 rushing attempts, they ended up with basically 16 yards.
hmm so I wanted to go back and look, and it's so funny that you say 1.1 because, and I'm going to keep calling it round one between these two when Georgia won 30-15. In round one of this game, Texas had the exact same stat rushing, 1.1 rush yards per attempt in that game. And not only that, they tacked on 5 more tackles for loss. Georgia did against Texas. Georgia's defense came up with 5 more tackles for loss and ended up with 6 sacks again, which they came in the first round with 7 sacks. So Georgia's defense had the mindset to stop the run, and both of us were thinking that maybe Trey Wisner is going to have a breakout game this game. I mean, they fed him the ball more. He's been getting more attempts. Has had record breaking games the last 2 games coming into this, and they just never could establish the run. They never could get it going. And on the flip side of that, I don't know what Trevor Etienne has bottled up and the hatred or the fuel or what makes this guy go against Texas, but him being back obviously helped Georgia. I mean, 141 rush yards for Georgia, and he had 94 of those with 2 touchdowns off 16 carries. He averaged 5.9 yards per carry.
Yeah, and I really thought that to try to get the rushing game going, I thought you might see a little bit more of Arch Manning kind of doing what Haynes King did the week before, especially with Quinn Ewers having the bum ankle and having the special brace made. We even seen, the very first play in overtime, Arch Manning came in and ran a little design run play and they picked up 5 yards. I just thought you might see a little bit more of that, just trying to get that Georgia defense going side to side. I also
And
thought, go ahead.
and for that, I liked what Sark tried to do in the first half, and he had success between the 20s with it, but he incorporated a lot of those motions. He incorporated a lot of flare outs by the backs. He tried to get the linebackers east to west to where he was opening up the box for the run game, and he tried trickery. He tried to snap it through Arch's legs for a design outside zone. He was trying things to incorporate it. And I had this, I mean, the exact same thought was, and it's a question for everybody. Anybody can answer it. Obviously, we want you to comment below. But do you think if Sark had to do it over, would you think he plays Arch Manning more to utilize and open the run game? And get this, we see how Georgia has been against mobile quarterbacks. Haynes King, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart. If you go back to the Bama versus Georgia game, Milroe had 16 carries for 117 yards and 2 touchdowns. He averaged 7.3 yards a carry. Go to the Ole Miss loss. Jackson Dart, 8 carries for 50 yards, 6.2 average. So in both of their losses, they're playing these mobile quarterbacks. I certainly thought we would see him package with Arch Manning more. They just never did.
Yeah, no doubt. And toward the end of the game, I didn't like on the last drive when Texas had a chance to win the game in regulation. I didn't like the last sequence there. Once they got the pass interference call and they got the first down inside the 30 with about 25, 30 seconds to go. I didn't like the double fake screen. I don't know if they was trying to set up a double fake screen. It looked like they were trying to fake screen left, fake screen right, and then the tight end was going to release down the middle of the field. When you're inside the red zone like that, Georgia's notorious for going cover zero, man to man on your receivers, putting their corners on an island and bringing the heat in that situation. And they're just not going to let you get something like that off. I didn't like that call. And another thing I didn't like was, and a lot of teams are doing this, we get to the 25-yard line and we just want to start throwing 50-50 balls.
Yeah.
There was one 50-50 ball that that Ewers threw that it was lucky it wasn't intercepted. Trying to throw it between two defenders. I don't know. I just didn't like that sequence. But I will say this: this is probably, and again, just my opinion, this is probably the fourth, maybe the fifth best defense that Kirby Smart has had since he's been at Georgia. But one thing that this defense does is when they need a big sack, they go get a big sack. When they need a turnover, they go get a turnover. They're having more points put up against them. More people are moving the ball and putting up more yards against them. But when it's time to make a play, they still make a play. They are like the Rocky Balboa of college football. They're not the biggest, they're not the toughest, they're not the flashiest, they're not the prettiest, but you just about got to kill them to beat them because they're always going to come back again and again and again. And they continue to do this. I mean, really and truly, they were outgained by over 100 yards. And just from the game that I watched, it looked like they physically beat Texas up the other night.
Absolutely. And to comment on that, Texas did outgain them on 100 yards, and this is we're by no means ragging Texas. I mean, because Texas's defense showed out in the first half. I mean, Georgia only
Absolutely.
had Georgia
Absolutely.
only had -2 rushing yards by the end of the first half. So I mean, it looked as if though Texas was on its way to win an SEC championship, and second half, but like we've seen game in and game out for Texas. I mean, for Georgia, they are a second half team. 6 games this year, Georgia has trailed at half. 6. They've played 13. That's almost half of their games. They have trailed at half every time, and they've won 4 of those. With 2 losses were Alabama and Ole Miss. And Alabama, they made a comeback and took the lead in the second half. So at that, this proves to me that Kirby and this team will not just lay down and die. They will
Mm-mm.
always have fight and they will always have grit. And that's probably just going to happen for Georgia for the rest of the time that Kirby Smart's coaching there, because he has preached this time and time and time again that this team does not lay down and it does not die.
Absolutely. And here's the question for you: Is it safe to say, in a weird way, that Stockton was the spark that Georgia needed for the second half?
Oh, absolutely. And he came in and did what he needed to do to win a game. He didn't come in and do anything flashy, but when you have a young guy like that come in, and you even if you're an average college football fan and you don't know, schemes, you don't know play designs, you don't know anything like this, it was evident that when he came in, the offense rallied around this kid, and there was an immediate spark. And it kind of lit a fire under the offensive line and even the receivers' rear ends, and he just came in guns a blazing and did what he had to do to go win a game.
Yeah, the first drive of the second half when he led them down the field for a touchdown drive to give them the first lead that they had in the game, that was just enormous. That was huge. And I really thought that in the overtime period that he made 2 plays, one of which definitely kept the game from going into a second overtime on the first 3rd and 3 when they ran a little rollout to the left and there's nowhere to go, and he holds onto the ball to the last second and flips it to Oscar Depp, who's able to fall forward and just barely get a first down. I mean, that was all on him. If he doesn't make that play, then they're bringing the field goal unit in, they're kicking a field goal, and then on 2nd and 8 when they ran the quarterback draw, and he absolutely got his head took off for him to be able to get the first down and B, to be able to hold on to the football in that situation. That
Yes,
was big.
yes, just the physicality mindset, the not quit and the grit that he had was just, I mean, it was amazing. Great game, great game.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and again, congratulations to Georgia. They are this year's SEC champion. As we'll get into, they're finished second in the last college football playoff rankings before the playoffs start, so they'll get a first round bye. So again, congratulations to them. Congratulations to Texas on a great season. Coming in here and making the SEC championship game in their first season. One thing I will say, I- I've been to a few SEC championship games, watched a ton. but go back a year ago into the fourth quarter with Alabama and Georgia. There were so many momentum swings and there were so many big plays, and you just knew that Alabama's playoff fate or Georgia's playoff fate was riding on the fourth quarter of that game last year. Saturday, I couldn't help but sit here and think, man, this game just isn't what it should be because we pretty much know both these teams are in the playoffs.
Going.
You know,
Yep.
I know it still means something to win the SEC, but just from me watching it, I truly felt like the playoffs have definitely watered down the SEC championship game.
I think it's watered down all conference championship games to where, and we've got a
Not the
segment on this.
ACC, buddy, not the ACC,
We've got a segment
not
on
that
this.
powerhouse conference.
We've got a segment on this later that we're going to cover, talking about the final rankings. But I do think that this was a collective group program win for Georgia. Just with their schedule. I mean, they ran through the gauntlet this year, and to be able to come out with 2 losses, 10 wins, and to win your conference in the schedule that they had to face, they deserve it, man. And I hate to use the word deserve it, but they truly were the best in the SEC this year. Um, and so kudos to them, and kudos to Kirby Smart and that coaching staff.
No doubt. No doubt.
And so with that, got a little SEC championship game shout outs here. Randy, take it away.
Yeah, so we actually had two scores, one on Facebook, one on Twitter, that was basically the same score. So we declared both winners. Um, dropped some hats off at the hat shop this week to get the patches put on. But our Facebook winner was EB Captures. In messaging him and getting everything lined up, discovered that he is actually a senior in high school, and he actually does his own photography. He's got his own photography business. He takes photographs for the school and all their sports. But EB Captures. So that's where the captures comes from. You can look him up on Facebook, see some of his work. He does a really, really good job. And then our Twitter winner was Auburn Nerd. He absolutely nailed it, and that is his Twitter handle. By the way, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody and call him a nerd or anything like that. That is his Twitter handle. So again, congratulations to both of these guys, and hopefully within a couple of weeks we'll get your hats. I'm gonna throw a coffee mug and a couple other things in there for you as well.
Absolutely. EB Captures, Jasper High School.
Absolutely.
Shout out alma mater. There you go. And so with that, we move on to the final college football playoff rankings. And it's hard being SEC fans and knowing that this conference is above all conferences in terms of play capability, talent, and what you produce on the field. It was difficult to stomach this week. And I'm not just saying that because I'm an Alabama fan. I'm saying it for the SEC as a whole. The SEC as a whole is basically getting the shaft with these rankings.
Yeah, and you've heard the rumor for a while that the SEC and the Big Ten have been working behind the scenes, and you've heard about the two super conferences to where the SEC may invite a couple more schools in and try to get up to about 20 teams, and the Big Ten may do the same thing. They may bring Notre Dame and one or two more in and try to get up to 20 teams, and you may have these two super conferences, and those two super conferences break off from the NCAA and go do their own thing and crown their own champion. And when I first started hearing that stuff, I'm kind of a traditionalist. I thought, nah, I don't like the thoughts of that. I, when I see these rankings in front of me, it really really makes me think maybe that's what's best for college football. And we're going to do it a little bit different this week. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide, Tyler. The next slide shows the actual matchups because the rankings are a little bit different. And here's a question. From Dante Williams, one of our listeners. This was his mailbag question this week. And this is why I say that I'm starting to lean more and more toward the SEC and Big Ten breaking away. His question was, out of the 12-team playoff field, how many teams do you believe have a legitimate shot to win the national title? Out of this field that we're looking at right now, how many have a legitimate shot? You answer first.
Legitimate cases here. I'm going to go 4, maybe 4. Well, 4.
I'm going to give
I'm going to say 4, maybe 5, and I'm going to throw Tennessee, Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, and Georgia all in that category, and that's
I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt because heck, the way they've got it drawn up, Penn State's pretty much got a cakewalk to the semifinal, and you never know what's going on with the Carson Beck situation. So I'll say 6. I'll say Penn State, Georgia, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, Tennessee. I think those 6 teams have a legitimate chance. If you want to make the case for Notre Dame, I'll listen, fine, whatever. But the other 5 teams, in my opinion, again, I'm an SEC homer. In my opinion, the other 5 teams have no business being in the playoffs at all.
It's hard to sit here, and there's warts with the new playoff system, and obviously that they will be tweaked, hopefully, by January 21st when the committee sits down after the national championship to go over these things. Hopefully they're discussed then and fixed for next year. It's hard to see a 9th-ranked Boise State team who played the teams that they did get a first-round bye over a Tennessee team, over a Texas team. It's hard to see that.
A Boise State team who played the 78th toughest schedule in America.
Yeah, that's what's hard to stomach is there's so many inconsistencies with this, but not only with this, with the actual college football playoff committee itself. They seem to say one thing one week that matters, and the next week it doesn't matter. Just like Ward Manuel came out and said, in quotes, we value strength of schedule, guys. I don't want to set the precedent that we don't. And we value non-conference games because of competition. What? How can you say in one breath that you value that when obviously your picks don't show that?
Yeah, I mean, you can't sit here and say that you value strength of schedule and then you've got this rated the way it is. Okay, let's just completely throw out Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss. We'll ignore that argument right now, and we'll play their little game, and we'll say this is the 12-team playoff. You can't even sit here and look us in a straight face, look at us with a straight face, and say that you value strength of schedule based on these rankings right here.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
If you value strength of schedule, then Tennessee should be hosting a playoff game.
That's exactly
There
right.
is no reason whatsoever that Tennessee should be traveling. And here's another thing that's so messed up about this whole situation. Congratulations, Oregon. You're the only Power 4 undefeated conference champion in America.
And now you have
Your reward in round 2, you get to play Tennessee or Ohio State, which is 2 of the better teams in this playoff. Oregon would have been better off to blow the Big Ten championship game, lose on purpose, and be rated where Penn State is. Look where Penn State. Sorry, Penn State, you lost the Big Ten championship. We're really going to stick it to you. We're going to let you face SMU first round, then you get to go play Boise the next round. By the way, you're also going to get a home playoff game and rake in millions and millions of dollars in hotel stay and concessions.
And it's so hard to gauge what we should do with conference championship losers. And this is no offense to Texas. Texas got a good deal. They went and lost.
Absolutely.
They went and lost their conference championship. And now they're the 5th seed, which we know on paper is the best place to probably be to at least make it to the Final Four. They're playing a 16th ranked Clemson, and then they get to play the Big 12 champion after that. The
And
same
again,
big,
here's
the same Big 12 champion who only 4 of the teams that they played in the regular season actually are going to a bowl.
here's where strength of schedule matters. Who has the better win on their resume? Anything that Texas has done or Tennessee's win over Alabama?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Tennessee, you are getting the raw end of the deal here, and it's not fair.
Absolutely.
And everybody wants to be throwing out this word. They did not deserve that placement.
Well, and that's another thing too. You know, I'm so tired of hearing the word deserve. That's just like Clemson. This is what's wrong. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Let's go ahead and get into this too. The next slide is kind of a meme that we put on here that says CFP needs fixed. You know, if you could just fix all the bugs, that would be great.
Well, but even before we do this, it's asinine to think that this is the 12 best. This is a play-in bracket. This is what we've created with this is a play-in bracket. And if I'll tell you who should be upset, and that's Miami right now, because why on Tuesday night before championship Saturday, why did Alabama's losses not matter then in that ranking to put them ahead of Miami? But then all of a sudden on Sunday, Alabama's losses mattered. They threw Miami out because of Alabama's wins. They weren't looking at losses then. They were looking at wins between the two programs then. And then all of a sudden now when we're comparing SMU, the losses matter more for Alabama and SMU.
Well, and this is one of my issues is all we've heard is 12-team playoff, we're going to get the best 12 teams. 12-team playoffs, we're going to get the 12 best teams. The committee, and I really, really think that part of this is done strategically for talking points to piss certain fan bases off, to make some fan bases just ecstatic. And the reason why I say this, unless you were trying to create drama, because if you remember after last week's rankings come out and Ward Manuel, you know, he kind of spilled the beans and said, well, you know, we're not going to reevaluate anybody that's not playing. All I heard for the rest of the week was, well, he took the drama out of it. He took the drama out of it. I really think they tried to manufacture drama because if you look at it, and again, this is the SEC Mafia. I can be an SEC homer, okay? Alabama is
Absolutely.
ranked 11th. Alabama's ranked 11th in the final college football playoff ranking. If you go back one screen, the University of Alabama comes in ranked 11th. So how can you sit here and say that we're taking the 12 best teams and we're going to go have a college football playoff, but the team that's ranked 11th in the final rankings, the team that's ranked 11, that's in the top 12, nah, they don't get a chance to go.
And another thing that completely and utterly does not make sense and baffles me is when you look at these rankings, based upon what we saw the committee do on Sunday, we knew that they chose that wins matter, correct? Wins matter, okay? It doesn't matter who you play. It doesn't matter who you play against. We're not going to factor in strength of schedule. If you've got wins matter. Okay, well, if that's the case, is why is Army ranked 22nd?
Exactly.
They went out and they won their conference championship. They won the Athletic American Conference. And they have 12 wins on the season or 11 wins on the season now. That's more than Syracuse. That's more than Illinois. That's more
Hey,
than Missouri. That's more than BYU.
Army is a conference champion with one
One
loss.
loss.
Clemson is a conference champion with 3 losses. Why don't you take Army above them if wins is the only thing that matters?
And that's exactly right. Because it doesn't matter because Clemson's strength of schedule was higher than Army. So how can strength of schedule matter in one instance and not matter for the other? And this is the thing that has frustrated everyone this week if you're an SEC fan, or I hope that it frustrates you if you're an SEC fan, because the SEC should get the benefit of a doubt when it comes to the things. When strength of schedule between two teams, that should be the case in point that matters. And whether we talk about Miami or the 3 SEC schools or SMU, let's just throw out those 5 teams because those were the 5 that were essentially in the bubble for the last spot. All those teams have their warts, and yes, the little things cost them in the worst times of all their losses, okay? And I understand when you're trying to pick that last spot, you're splitting hairs. But what frustrates me as an SEC fan is strength of schedule it was never even honored in that room that day.
Right. And my thing is when we're when the committee is asked, okay, what factored into the decision for Ohio State to be the final home team and have a home game in the playoffs and Tennessee to have to travel? Why did you give the nod to Ohio State over Tennessee? They'll give you a completely different answer versus what factored into the decision to take SMU over Alabama, or what factored into the decision for Indiana to go on the road to Notre Dame. Why did Notre Dame get the home game versus Indiana getting the home game? It's always different answers. And so what they're doing is they're just using whatever criteria they can grasp at to justify their decisions. And
Absolutely.
a lot of people don't like this. A lot of people hated this. It got a bad rap. I I loved the BCS system. I love the BCS
Well, it was
because
set. It was set. You knew what the criteria was, and it was computerized.
well, it wasn't even all computerized because it factored in the AP, the coaches poll, and all the computer rankings. So you had the human element, it had the computer rankings, it had the strength of schedule, and that's another thing that's crazy about this. And again, not just crying about Alabama right here, but the AP poll had Alabama in the playoffs. The coaches poll would have had Alabama in the playoffs. The BCS system would have had Alabama in the playoffs. Everybody under the sun, except for the college football rankings committee, would have had Alabama in the playoffs. And that's fine because at the end of the day, I do want to say this. At the end of the day, Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina, they all did drop the ball 3 times. And
Absolutely.
I'm not so much on here arguing and crying for them to get in. I'm more so arguing and screaming from the mountaintops. You have completely disrespected the SEC by what you've done right here. You've
Yes.
disrespected it. I mean, look at the Big Ten. The Big Ten got Ohio State, Indiana, Penn State, and Oregon in. It's funny that when you look at Oregon's schedule prior to the Big Ten championship game, they only played one of those top 4 teams.
Yep.
Penn State only played one of those top 4 teams. Indiana only played one of those top 4 teams. Now, Ohio State did play Penn State and Oregon, so they got to play 2 of them. But it's so funny that the top half of that conference was so watered down with their schedules. And then, boom, we got 4 Big Ten teams in, and 3 of them, one gets a first round bye, and 2 of them are getting to host a playoff game.
It's it's baffling, and here's a little thing to put perspective on it on just how terrible this is. The SEC had 8 teams in the top 10 for strength of schedule. I'm going to say
Yes.
that again for you. The SEC had 8 teams in the top 10 for strength of schedule. The ACC had 4 teams total in the top 25 for strength of schedule. The SEC had 13 teams in the top 25. 10 of those, 8 of those in the top 10, but 13 total in the top 25 for strength of schedule. So you tell me what the problem is with that.
Well, and even going back to the committee and a lot of fans and a lot of people on social media who tell you that unequivocally, without a doubt, that the most important criteria is wins. I have heard that so much. Wins, wins, wins. Okay. If people really believe that, why is there not an outrage for Boise State to not be the number 2 overall seed in front of Georgia? Because Boise State has more wins than Georgia.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And another argument, because I know people are making this argument. When I made the comment about the SEC and I made the comment about South Carolina, Alabama, and Ole Miss being 9-3 and how I feel like the SEC got the shaft, I know there'll be some people out there screaming when I say that those 3 deserved it before Clemson. There's going to be people out there going, Clemson got to play their way in. Clemson played their way in. They won a conference championship. They deserved it. They proved it on the field. Yeah, they proved it on the field because they play in a weak conference to where you can make the conference championship game with 3 losses. You can make the conference championship game by getting raw dogged by 30 points to Georgia in the first football game of the season. I guess we need to apologize to Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina for not playing in a weak conference. I mean, every single argument that people are trying to make, they're actually making the argument for the SEC to have more teams in the playoff.
Absolutely. You give South Carolina Clemson's schedule, I guarantee you they have 10 wins.
I
You
mean, you think
give
about this. We keep using the word deserving, deserving, deserving. I keep hearing that word, and it's making me, just start bleeding from my ears. Deserving. 1 week ago from this past Saturday, South Carolina beat Clemson head to head on the field. They both finished with a 9-3 record, but Clemson deserved to get to go to a conference championship game and have a chance to beat an SMU who had the 64th hardest schedule, had not beat one ranked team all season, had only played one ranked team all season, and Clemson deserved to get to go play that team for a spot on the line to make the playoffs. That's a broken system. That is a broken system.
It is. It is. And again, I'm one of the people that when it doesn't go your way, I'm a firm believer you have to look in the mirror. And this is not us trying to cry about Alabama, us trying to cry about Ole Miss, us trying to cry about South Carolina. Yes, those 3 teams dropped the ball. Those 3 teams
Absolutely.
had
Absolutely.
terrible losses, and those
Make
losses
that clear. Make that clear.
Those
3
losses,
teams dropped the ball.
yes, those 3 losses are immediately. Those are what cost you from getting in this thing. If you handle your business in your own games, there's no question. Ole Miss and Alabama and probably South Carolina all have a chance to get probably 2 more SEC spots in this thing. I mean, let's just be real here. But that just, I wanted to clear that air that this is by no means us crying about that, because you have to look in the mirror at the end of the day and you have to make your own adjustments for your own team. And so with that, what
Let
needs to be
me
done?
say this real quick. Let me say this real quick before you move on to fixing it. Well, I tried to move on once and you stopped me, so let me stop you and even the score here.
There you go. 1-1. I like it.
So I keep hearing you should have beat Vandy and you should have beat Oklahoma. You should have beat Kentucky and you should have beat Florida. South Carolina really doesn't have any bad losses other than the fact that Ole Miss, beat them down, but they really don't have the big wins that Alabama and Ole Miss has. I mean, their best win is 16th ranked Clemson when Alabama and Ole Miss both beat the SEC champion. But I want to make this point to everybody that says Alabama should just beat Vandy and Oklahoma and Ole Miss should have just beat Florida and Kentucky. Here's the problem with that. When you're playing at Tennessee, and then you're playing Georgia, you're going on the road to Wisconsin, Ole Miss is playing LSU, they're playing South Carolina. When you're playing all these big games and they're starting to stack up over and over and over, it is natural instinct to get to the part of the schedule to where you see Vanderbilt and you see Kentucky and you just take a deep breath and you say, all right, we can relax this week, guys. That's natural instinct. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying that it should happen, but every team does that. No, they don't. Oregon's undefeated. Really? Check out
Look at
that
Wisconsin.
check out the Oregon-Wisconsin game. Oregon was just fortunate that their schedule worked out to where when they had their game to where they took a sigh and a deep breath and didn't go into it mentally proper the way they should have. They were lucky enough to be playing a Wisconsin team that they were still able to scrap out a win. Again, this is hypotheticals, and I know there'll be people that disagree with me. That's fine. But I would just about bet you if on the day Oregon played Wisconsin, had they walked into Oklahoma and it been senior night and Oklahoma playing for a bowl and that be the performance that Oregon turned in, I believe Oregon would have got beat that night. And when you look at SMU, who nearly got beat by Nevada in the first game of the season, SMU, who struggled with Boston College, should have got beaten by Duke, struggled with Louisville. Now they did put it on the powerhouse Houston Baptist Christian Bobcats or whatever they are. They put it on them pretty good. But when you have a schedule that sets up over and over and over, and you're not having to really get up for the Georgias and get up for the Tennessees, you don't really have a reason to take that deep breath and go, okay, we can catch our breath this week, guys, because you're not
Absolutely.
so mentally spent. And hey, I'm just a guy. I don't even claim. I don't even want to claim to be a podcaster. Okay, I don't even want to claim that. But if you think what I'm saying is wrong, if you think I'm a moron and he's just trying to make excuses, go watch Kirby Smart's post game interview when he's receiving the SEC Conference Championship trophy, and he looks at Greg Sankey and he says, "I tell you what, we're going to do for the next 3 weeks in between this game." And our playoff game, we're going to get some much needed rest because
Yes.
this team is mentally spent because of the schedule that Greg Sankey and his associates put us through. So yeah, having to get up every single week is tough, and you're going to see the Vanderbilts and the Oklahomas, and you're going to take a deep breath, and you're going to say, "Hey, you know what? We can catch our breath this week." And in the SEC, when you do that, it bites you in the rear end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so now, finally moving along, what needs to be done to accurately choose the 12 best teams in this conference? We see in basketball that strength of schedule, it doesn't matter what conference, across the board equally, strength of schedule is taken into account for every basketball team.
Did you freeze up on me?
No, I'm done. That was it.
Oh, there you go. Well, my thing is, first off, if I'm fixing this, I am I'm doing away with the automatic bids. I'm doing away with the automatic bids, and here's why.
You have to because no. Go ahead. I'll be on a tangent about this.
If if you win your conference and you're good enough to make the playoffs, you're going to get in. I mean, I know people will argue with me and they're going to say that I'm just hating and that I'm crying. You will not convince me that in the year 2024 that Clemson deserves to be in this playoffs. Not when they went 0-2 against the SEC. When they played the SEC champion and got beat by 30, and then they played the sixth best team in the SEC in South Carolina and got beat and lost both of those games. You're not going to convince me that they deserve to make the college football playoffs because they beat SMU. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm doing away with the automatic bids. Tell,
Yeah.
tell us one thing you would do to fix it.
Honestly, there has to be a set criteria year in and year out. You can't have one year it be based on strength of schedule, and then the next it's just based on wins, because now the committee has set the precedent that it doesn't matter who you play as long as you win. And so teams are going to forfeit competition and competitive games in nature for easier non-conference games. You can kiss a non-SEC schedule goodbye. There is nobody in the world that's going to schedule 9 SEC games now. Nobody.
No
That
coach
that
will go for that. No coach will
no,
go for that.
no, not when your 8 games are hard enough as they are. So
I
there
mean,
has to
think
be.
about that for a second. Think about that for 1 second. The SEC champion finished 10-2 in the regular season. I mean, that's the first time we've seen that. Gosh, probably since I guess LSU back in 2007.
Mhm.
Um, so your SEC champion finished with 2 losses. Could you imagine if every single SEC team took off one of their patsy Eastern Michigan, Georgia State, South Florida, Bowling Greens? Could you imagine if every school took that off and replaced it with another SEC game? You probably would have 9-3 would probably be the best record in the conference.
Yeah, you would have you had the potential to have a 9-win team win the SEC championship game after they've
Hmm.
played the SEC championship game. 9 wins. It just there has to be some sort of accountability, honestly, for this playoff committee. There has to be something that has to be set in stone.
Well, and two, one thing that's going to have to be done is you've got the playoff committee that changes every couple of years. There's got to be some type of continuity. Like you said, there's got to be some kind of criteria. You know, you take NCAA basketball. They use the RPI. RPI is a big determining factor in who makes the NCAA tournament, and nobody bats an eye when you have a team from whatever conference, has 20 wins, but they get left out because they're in a weak conference. And then you've got somebody from the ACC who we know up to this point has been the premier college conference in college basketball. But of course, the SEC just dominated them in the SEC ACC challenge. But this is a football podcast. But nobody's batted eyes over the years when an ACC team went 8-8 in conference play and got the benefit of the doubt and was a 2 or a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament because we all understood their strength of schedule. But yet in college football, which is a more physical sport and strength of schedule matters, then we can't make that argument in college football. Strength of schedule doesn't matter. It's just all about the number of wins that you get.
Yeah, yeah. It something has to change, um, and it has to change soon. I would venture out to say that if the SEC were to get snubbed again like this, I would venture out to say that Greg Sankey would do something about it, and more than likely, talks of doing their own thing would drastically be accelerated if it were to happen again. Um, and that's that. I mean, that's just
The
the part.
second thing that I would like to see changed about this college football playoff, what benefit does Georgia, Oregon, the mighty Broncos of Boise State, and the mighty Devils of Arizona State, what benefit do they get financially for winning
None.
their conferences? Now, yeah, they get a first round bye. I understand that, and that's
And
big. But those teams, the first round bye or the first round playoff games, those should be your bowl games. The second round games, they should be on campus.
they've
Georgia
got it.
should be hosting a playoff game. Oregon should be hosting a playoff game. The 3 and 4 seed, they should be hosting a playoff game. They have shown they are the 4 best teams or 4 highest ranked, 4 most deserving. I don't even know what we're calling it anymore, but they got the first 4 seeds. They should be getting a
And
home playoff game.
I'm glad you said that because that's one of the points that I wanted to make. They have it backwards. It's backwards because, like we've seen game in and game out across the board, ACC, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, home field advantage matters a ton
Absolutely.
in big time situations. And conference champion winners are receiving no reward at all. I mean, yeah, you get a first round bye, you get an automatic bid. That's great and that's wonderful. But neutral site games, that's just what they are. They're neutral site. You don't have that home field advantage. You don't have your student section there to make it a hostile environment. You don't get the financial benefits that the University of Ohio State's going to get, the University of Penn State's going to get, University of Notre Dame's going to get. I mean, you don't have those things, and I would like to see that swapped around to where, and I'm not going to say it's like a play-in type deal, but where you're at large games to make it to the quarterfinals. Though, like you said, those should be neutral site games.
Absolutely. And you think about, these playoff games and stuff of when the playoffs are, um, they're starting 4 and 5 days before Christmas, and then the second round is 4 and 5 days after Christmas. Um, they might even need to look at first and second round games being at home, because if you're playing in that first round, then you're turning around playing in that second round. You're going to have to be a millionaire to be able to afford to go to two of those playoff games in a row.
Yeah,
I mean, they're
absolutely.
they're 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 really, kind of cutting out the middle class fan, with ticket prices and travel and things like that. And here's another thing I would fix is the scheduling. And I know they've been trying to get this right forever, and this is kind of a small one, not necessarily toward the rankings and stuff. I'm so tired of the championship game being on Monday night. That is awful. The NFL has done away with the Pro Bowl now. They play their little flag football game, and they do their little contest to see who can throw the farthest and do all that stuff. How awesome would it be if college football season got pushed back one weekend and the national championship was the Sunday before the Super Bowl, to where you had the national championship on the Sunday before the Super Bowl, and then you had the Super Bowl. Remember, the AFC and NFC championship games are 2 weeks before the Super Bowl. They take that Sunday off before the Super Bowl, and that's when they used to do the Pro Bowl. They don't do that anymore. That would be awesome to me to have like the college football championship game that Sunday, the Super Bowl the very next Sunday, and get away from that Monday night bull crap, because by the time the national championship game rolls around, the holidays are over. Everybody's went back to work. That is a work night, and because of the way TV is done with the East Coast and West Coast and stuff, it doesn't start till 8 o'clock at night, and it's midnight or later getting over with.
Yep, absolutely. I love that idea. That would be awesome if we could get to that. Um, but yeah, something's got to give. There's got to be more consistency, and there's got to be more transparency with this whole thing.
Yeah.
The non-transparency is not good for fan bases. It's not good for coaching staffs, players. It's not good for anything. So transparency would be another thing. And I guess we can go ahead and move into our final thoughts for this episode before we beat a dead horse with all the things that we could talk about. So
Yeah, we did have one more reader question. I'm going to save that for a later podcast. We're going to be back next week. I'm going to go ahead and run through this real quick. We'll be back next week to actually break down the three SEC teams that will be playing, and give our predictions and talk more about that.
yeah,
We'll continue to do a podcast on every Monday throughout the college football playoffs. And then once we get through the playoffs, we'll probably just do one a month. So like in February, we may do a recap and kind of give everybody a grade for their season. And then once we get into March, start looking at rosters after the transfer portals, and then we'll just kind of do one per month. But I had the question is from Big Daddy TA, is his social media handles. He asked about coaches on the hot seats this year and for next. I don't think for the first time in forever that any coach is going to get fired this year, but that is definitely something about coaches on the hot seat for next year. That in some of our episodes in the off season, we'll definitely get into some of those comments, and I just don't want to. I want to be able to properly take the time to answer that and go into depth. And I know we're getting to the point where we're going to kind of want to wrap this up. So didn't want him to think we were ignoring him. But this year, I don't think anybody's on the hot seat, but I definitely do think there's some candidates for next year, and we'll definitely answer that moving forward.
absolutely. Quick shout out to the recruiting classes in the SEC. There's 13 in the top 25 in the recruiting classes. So we're gonna have a lot of
58 of the top 100 players committed to SEC schools.
SEC schools. Yep. So
That's why the SEC gets the benefit of the doubt.
keep riding that recruiting train, baby. I'm sure we'll have so much to talk about. Like you said, later in February with recruitment and looking at what recruits are going where, how this helps and how they fit into programs that they're going to. Did want to make a slight change. Next week, we may send out the episode a day late. It may be on Wednesday when we get it. Got some holiday stuff coming up, so gonna have some family things going on this and there. But we are going to release an episode next week. I know you guys are on the edge of your seats every week to listen to us. So, yeah, I mean, we just enjoy this, just talking ball. I'm gonna pull
What's
up
your final thoughts? You have a final thought?
I don't, man. I got all my final thoughts out of the way with
So I've got one right here. I've got one right here.
Ward Manuel and his great 5-year extension because he's so
So,
knowledgeable at this whole thing.
so here's my final thought. I've been on Twitter a lot, trying to interact with people, trying to grow a social media presence and kind of grow the channel and stuff. And I've had a lot of interactions with people, and there seems to be a common theme. There seems to be a lot of ridicule and a lot of people making fun of Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina, especially their arch rival fan bases. I know I've seen a lot of Mississippi State, just ridiculing Ole Miss about not making the playoffs. Of course, I've seen Auburn celebrate Alabama not making it. I've seen Tennessee celebrate it. I've seen Georgia and some of these other teams. I've seen, Missouri celebrating South Carolina not making it, in Arkansas, and some of these teams that are kind of a non-traditional rival. I know their big rival is Clemson, but that's a different conference. Here's my final thought. Georgia was 10-2 in the regular season. Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina were one game behind them in the standings. One game. Again, let me say it. The SEC champion finished 10-2. I really believe the days of a 12-0 SEC champion are over. With the transfer portal and NIL, the way your second string players, if they're not happy, they're going to transfer out and go somewhere that can play. And your second string guys may not be much worse than your first string players. And if the ball bounces their way, they may be good enough to beat you that next year if they go to another SEC school. So I think the 12-0 is over with. I really think 11-1 is the ceiling, but more than likely because of the way the schedules have been stiffened with Oklahoma and Texas coming into the league, I think it's going to be the norm that 10-2 is probably going to be your SEC champion. So what I'm saying is all of you schools and all of you fans of schools that are mocking 9-3 SEC teams for not getting in the playoffs, you should take a step back and say, I should reevaluate. And you need to ask yourself this question. Is it more likely that the team that you support next season goes 9-3 or 12-0?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the answer is if the teams that didn't make the playoff, the teams like the Mississippi States and the teams like the Auburns, who was 5-7, and I've said it all year long, they were probably one of the biggest underachievers in the SEC. But I mean, can Auburn go 9-3 next year? Sure, Auburn can go 9-3 next year.
Absolutely.
How many of these teams could go 9-3 next year if the schedule, sets up nicely for them? So you need to be saying, do I want to beat the team that won the SEC and go 9-3 and only lose Southeastern Conference championship games? Do I want to miss the playoffs because of that? And the answer should be no. The entire SEC should be just frustrated, upset, and mad. I definitely don't think there should be teams in the SEC that should be laughing and mocking other teams for not making it, because what you are doing is you are celebrating the fact that the College Football Playoff Committee devalued your entire
The
conference.
SEC. Yep, absolutely. And that's kind of why we harp so hard on the strengths of the Southeastern Conference is just buku's ahead of any other conference. And us, we are SEC homers. We are going to eat, sleep, and breathe SEC until we're long gone from this earth, just because it's what we grew up watching, and it's the best. It's the best. So
I'll promise you this much right now. I promise you that Steve Sarkisian is thanking the good Lord above that he's playing Clemson and not Ole Miss this Saturday.
yes,
Or not this Saturday, but the 20th in the first round of the playoffs. I'll bet you that James Franklin is tickled to death that he's got SMU the first round and not Alabama. And I bet you he's even happier to know that he's got Boise State waiting on him and not South Carolina.
yep, absolutely. And with that, we conclude this episode. Thank you again for joining us, guys. We always enjoy it. Always enjoy it.
Subscribe. Message us on Twitter and stuff. Email us. Let's grow this thing.
Yeah. Let's grow it. Direct message, reply. Go on YouTube, hit the little bell button, like and subscribe, comment under our videos. We always try to get back to you guys on everything that we do. We love interacting with you guys. And with that, I hope the holiday
Randy,
seasons. I hope the
Randy's
holiday
mobile
seasons.
out.
Oh, Randy's out. He's leaving early, guys. He said
Randy's
forget
out.
it tonight. Yeah, man. Love doing this. SEC Mafia out, guys.